Okay, so you obviously signed up to this event, so you responded to our invitation, and we want to cover three things in this event. We're going to introduce the Refugee and Asylum Seeker Partnership, its members, its aims, and its vision. We're going to cover an impact report, an evaluation report, which describes the partnership's efforts and its learning from its activities during the COVID-19 pandemic so far. And there will be a call on mayoral candidates for the Bristol election and for the Metro Mayor, the West of England Combined Authority election in early May. I would like to just note that we are in a pre-election period for the May elections, and there are strict rules about events in this period. And as charities, we have a legal duty to remain impartial and non-political. So after much deliberation, the partnership and its steering group in planning this event have invited mayoral candidates to the event to attend and listen. After the event, the partnership will ask those candidates to sign up to and make commitments to these asks and make pledges. After the election, the partnership will then work with the elected officials in their new offices. So I just wanted to make sure that that's understood. We always, when we run these events in an election, people always want to speak to candidates, and there's a kind of broad rule that you either have to do all or none. And because we wanted to achieve these other aims for this event, we decided to take this approach. We will appreciate your support. So in terms of how we're structuring the event, next slide, please, Rosa. Thank you. I'm going to give a short overview of the partnership's development so far. And then we're going to do some speedy introductions from the 16 organisations that comprise the partnership, so that those that are unfamiliar understand which organisations are involved. There'll then be two presentations, one from Cherim and Layla about this impact of the work in COVID-19 pandemic. Caroline's then going to outline the asks of the mayoral candidates. During those presentations, we'll ask participants to submit questions and make comments in the chat, which we will then feed into the panel discussion. And then I'll finish with some next steps and an evaluation. Okay. Thanks, Rosa. Let's have the next slide. I'll just do an overview of how the partnership started and where we are now. So this partnership is built on a long history of collaboration in the sector, and I've got a mini case study here. I just want to go through this to illustrate why the partnership is needed. So MA was an asylum seeker from Afghanistan. He has diabetes and rough sleeping would be detrimental to his health. Bristol Red Cross referred him to Bristol City Council for emergency accommodation under the Everyone In provision. Bristol Refugee Rights provided a smartphone for him to be able to keep in touch with family, friends, and crucially, services. Bristol Refugee Rights also referred him to a solicitor for immigration advice. Red Cross and Borderlands have provided financial support. Various agencies are still working with this client to try and get his asylum case going and to assist him to apply for support from the Home Office. So with one person, we can see there's 5+ organisations already involved. And it really demonstrates, I believe, that the complexity of people that the refugee and asylum seeker sector in Bristol needs to respond to. So in 2019, this particular partnership developed as a result of a conversation between Beth from Refugee Rights and myself, where we were just scoping out what the current situation was for the sector and the encouragement of sector to work collaboratively, perhaps more formally, by funders and commissioners, and knowing that services needed to join up. So we put together a plan of action with VOSCA as a support and development agency for the community sector, providing direct, proactive support to a partnership that was very, very in its early days. And we kind of, VOSCA committed to working with this partnership and this idea over a kind of 18-month period, which continues now. In our initial work, we decided that we started to work with 16 organisations, and these are primarily Bristol-based organisations whose purpose is to serve and work with refugees and asylum seekers. We knew that there were other organisations that also work with them, but it's not their kind of core business. So, that was our initial focus. We did a round of interviews and surveys and research, and broadly, these were the things we found. There's diverse organisations. We all know this. Complex clients and complex regulation. There was some good existing partnership work on which to build. There was limited influencing of decisions and policy. All these organisations are really busy doing the business, and their kind of strategic involvement was, although it did happen, it was inconsistent, and that there's a strong desire for closer working. Claire, please click. Oh, sorry, Rosa. Thank you. So this, I won't go into this detail because it's, did I say the word boring? Excuse me. This is quite technical and it's about partnership development, but it's phased, and we're at the moment, we're in phase 2. Next slide, please. Okay, so with the work we've done, we have established a vision for this partnership, which is that all refugees and asylum seekers enjoy healthy and fulfilling lives in Bristol. They have a voice and their needs are met by an effective, unified and sustainable sector. We've done some work on the values of this partnership because the organisations are all values driven. They had lots of commonality and they're summarised in these 4 points. An action plan exists for phase 2 and phase 3, and over the next year, 18 months or so, the partnership will work together to provide the best services, to more effectively achieve better outcomes, to provide a voice, and that services will be sustainable, effective and efficient. And I'll just say, on reflection, having worked with the partnership for 18 months, and having distilled some of that into 2 short slides here, this is a fantastic piece of work, and the organisations are very willing and very committed to working with each other, and to have achieved a vision and a clear direction in this period while there's been a pandemic on is in my mind a very impressive development. I am now going to invite partnership members to briefly, very briefly, I think people have been asked to do 30 seconds or less, to introduce their organisation to the wider participants here today. So I'm going to call on Aid Box Community first.
Hi there, my name is Robin. I'm the Chief Exec of ABOX Community, and it's lovely to see so many people today. ABOX Community was founded in 2015 in response to the refugee crisis down in northern France. In 2016, we moved to Bristol, where we've set up our free shop and hub. We run a women's group as well, and we have our service user advisory group, Team Heartbeat, and also our connection service, where we match members of the community with the service users. We are currently running a click and collect or click and delivery service in this time of outbreak, and we are hoping to open up very soon. That was a very whistle-stop tour of us, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. That was rather beautifully concise. Lovely. Do we have someone from Ashley Community Housing, please?
Yeah, hiya, good morning, everyone. So I'm Tom, I'm a research and project lead from ACH. We provide integration services to refugees and other vulnerable migrants. We're founded in Bristol in 2008. across all of our services, we work with around 2,500 people every year. We're providing supported housing units as well as move-on housing and emergency accommodation. We also provide training running from pre-entry level up through to level 3. And we also work nationally and internationally with other partners to pilot new methodologies of integration. And at the moment, we're particularly working on bridging the digital divide for refugees and other migrants.
Thank you very much, Tom. And someone from Borderlands, please. Sorry, have we got anyone from Borderlands? Team, help me. Okay, no one's speaking, so I'm going to come back to Borderlands in a minute then. Let's have somebody from Bridges for Communities, please.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you. I'm Dan. I'm the Managing Director of Bridges for Communities, and we work with communities across Bristol to improve social cohesion and community integration. This includes a focus on the inclusion of refugees and asylum seekers through befriending programs that provide one-to-one support out in the community, partnership with the resettlement program at Bristol City Council. We've got a walking program, a project that develops skills and employability, and we provide cultural awareness training as well. That's us.
Thanks, Dan. And Bristol Refugee, Bristol City of Sanctuary.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Wardell, and I work for Bristol City of Sanctuary. We work with a committed group of people, organisations and businesses, and with the local authority to build a city of welcome, safety and hope for all, especially those seeking sanctuary here. We campaign to ensure that the values of sanctuary and welcome are recognised on both a local and national level, and are part of a wider network of villages, towns, cities and regions across the UK, all committed to the vision of sanctuary.
Thank you very much, Anna. And do we have somebody from Bristol Hospitality Network, please?
Bristol Hospitality Network works with local people who might have a spare room to provide the sort of physical and mental safe space for people who've been refused asylum so that they can work on a fresh asylum claim. And we have a help team who works with those people who are either hosted or on the waiting list to try and help them put evidence together and understand the asylum system and refer on solicitors.
Thank you, Eleanor. Bristol Refugee Festival, please.
Hi, I'm Jules, Festival Director of Bristol Refugee Festival. So the festival runs an annual programme of events in June each year. But we also do, we're now developing a year-round community engagement programme. And our vision is really to ensure that refugees and asylum seekers feel welcome and confident and valued and able to share their skills and knowledge and culture within their local communities and beyond.
Thank you, Jules. And Bristol Refugee Rights.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth Wilson, the Director at Bristol Refugee Rights. Bristol Refugee Rights has been open in Bristol for around 15 years. We've always been based around a drop-in, but we focus on providing welcome, support and advice to asylum seekers and new refugees. And we have specific support services for families with very young children and for people who are LGBT+. We both focus on meeting basic needs and supporting people at the start of the process, but also supporting people when they get into difficulties within the process and to move on into a fulfilling life.
Thank you, Beth. Is there somebody please from Bristol Signing Support Group?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sarah Methven. I'm part of the volunteer group called Bristol Signing Support, which I've just read started in 2011, so they're about to do 10-year anniversary. Our main role is to attend Patchway police station when migrants have to report to the Home Office, and we offer a kind of supportive service, and we check on people's well-being, and we signpost to other organisations around the city. I think during COVID, we're one of the few organisations that have had regular face-to-face contact with a smaller group than we normally meet and a different group than we normally meet, but we've kind of continued with our patchway performance pretty much throughout COVID when people have had to sign.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so Bristol, British Red Cross then, please.
Hi, yes, I'm Cherry. I'm a service manager for refugee services for British Red Cross. And as you know, British Red Cross is a very old charity established in 1870. But our refugee service, so
yeah, no, it was fine. And we're up to 3-minute runs suddenly from 90 seconds.
Gillian,
go to
could you
2.
please mute yourself?
Can we either mute Gillian or ask her? Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so our refugee service was established back in 2005 here in Bristol. We are based in Easton, and we provide mainly move-on support, helping people after they receive their status, their leave to remain. We help people to apply for universal credit, housing, further education, etc. We also support people on family reunion process, as well as we support people on destitution support. We give cash to people who have no other income. We have a small support for vulnerable women who have been subject to any violence due to their gender-based, as well as we provide international family tracing and messaging for people who are looking for their loved ones. So that's us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, The Haven next, please. Okay, do we know if we've got anyone from The Haven? Okay.
We did have someone registered for The Haven, but it doesn't look like they're here, unfortunately.
Okay, well let's skip to Project Mama then, please.
Hello, I'm Peggy Woodward and I'm a volunteer with Project Mama. The founder, Fiona Mann, sends her apologies, can't be here today. It was founded in Bristol by Fiona in 2018. It stands for Maternity Action for Migrants and Asylum Seekers, and it provides volunteer support birth companion for women who are asylum seekers, have refugee status, are survivors of human trafficking or modern slavery, or have uncertain immigration status, and if they're expecting a baby or have recently had a baby. And we provide support through the process, navigating the system, collaborating with NHS, statutory, other groups. And it's challenging through COVID, but we try to have some meetings before the birth and offer on call from 37 weeks pregnant until the baby's born, so that the mother will not have to give birth without a birth partner, and then support afterwards. A big part of our support also was the Mama Hub at Salvation Army on Fridays, which obviously had to stop during COVID. We're hoping to reopen that as soon as possible so the mothers can link with other mothers and find friends after the birth. Thank you. And it's lovely to be here today.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, Refugee Council, please.
Morning, I'm Helen Peden from the Refugee Council. I'm a children's advisor on the Children's Advice Project, and I work with young people under 18 who are progressing through the asylum process across the Southwest region. Our project offers support and advice as they proceed with their asylum claim, and we've been very lucky to continue some face-to-face work during the pandemic, and that's thanks to lots of lovely partners in the local area.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then Refugee Women of Bristol.
Hello, good morning. My name is Laila Ismail. I'm the Development Manager for Refugee Women of Bristol. RWOB is set up 2003 by a group of refugee and asylum seeking women, and is entirely governed by refugee and asylum seeking community. We provide basic support, usually run at the Robbie Center, where we meet immediate support to provide services. We support women and one-to-one through welfare calls, provide food, we have different projects that helps women to access services. Refugee women of Bristol have been enabling women to use their assets and bring their priorities to the front line. So we've been campaigning female genital mutilation and bring it into a Bristol model. We campaign for opening the first FGM community clinic in Bristol. We set up 4 services such as domestic violence. So we enable women to have leadership roles within the community in Bristol. And recently, a lot of women that we've been supporting start up self-organized women who have been responding to the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Okay, Southern Brooks, please.
Hi, everybody. So for those of you who don't know, Southern Brooks is a development organisation in South Gloucestershire. We work in South Glos and Bristol, providing a really we work with, oh, are we okay sound-wise?
I think we're having some difficulties tomorrow, but you can hear.
That's okay, I can type it in the chat.
Oh, do please, but I just in case people can't, Southern Brooks offer a drop-in service in Kingswood, and that's specifically for refugees and asylum seekers. Thank you, Tamara. I believe we've got apologies from Trauma Foundation Southwest, and I just want to come back and see if anyone is here from Borderlands that would like to just introduce their organisation.
I'm a volunteer from Borderlands. Would that do?
Oh, please, Marion. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I'm a volunteer with Borderlands, although obviously haven't been doing much with during COVID. But they provide a sort of drop-in service on Mondays and Tuesdays, and with a meal on Tuesdays. And during COVID, they've been providing food boxes for people to either collect or they've delivered. And recently, they've extended that to a hot meal on Tuesdays. They also have a mentoring service, and more recently they've started. And they have English classes, and more recently they've started a scheme for people being able to use computers, and there's a number of other things that they do, but that will kind of do for starters.
Thank you, Maria. That's really helpful. Okay, so we wanted to just we wanted to do that so that audience members could understand the diversity of the provision in Bristol. These organisations have different structures. They provide responsive and different services. They've got different histories, and between them, they provide fantastic range of services for the diverse people that come to Bristol. So that's the partnership and how it's developed so far. And we were happily doing lots of partnership development when the pandemic struck, and of course everyone in the audience will understand that that's had a major impact on people and communities and on organisations and services. So our next presentation is from Cherim and Layla to describe how the partnership and member organisations responded to the pandemic and the impact and learning from that. There's another presentation after. I just want to make a note. Sorry, that's that we don't need. Yeah, I'm going to hand over in a minute. That during the presentation, you will have questions and comments. Please put them in the chat. And when we come to the panel discussion, I will select questions and comments and invite people to put those to the panel. But please do put them in. This will also help the partnership and the steering group to learn what people are asking and how the partnership can respond. So I'm going to hand over to Cherim and Layla for their slides and their presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen. And I just want to see whether Can everybody see the screen, my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So my name is Cherim and I work for British Red Cross. So last summer, at the end of the first lockdown, we decided that it would be really useful to evaluate our sort of response to COVID lockdown, to the first lockdown, so to be ready, or prepared for the future lockdowns. So Beth Wilson from Bristol Refugee writes, Sarah Methven from Bristol Signing Support, and myself, we decided to do this report. Also, we included all the members from BRASP and others who were interviewed for the purpose of this rapid evaluative exercise. And Voska was helping us each step of the way. So this evaluative exercise was undertaken through semi-structured interviews with all BRASP partners, and additional list of organizations or partners we worked with during COVID-19 was identified, and a number of them were selected to be interviewed. So in the end, we interviewed 19 participating organizations, and so we just wanted to learn of what was achieved during the first lockdown, what can be done differently, what are we going to learn from this, and how to be prepared for the lockdown 2, 3, and whenever. Or it doesn't have to be lockdown, could be any other crisis that we could adapt, the learnings from this report. So we sort of did some research, and we thought that let's start with the achievement. So in terms of money, Bristol City Council gave the sector about £30,000, and we managed to deliver that money to 307 individuals. So the money was distributed by BRASP organisations such as BRR, Red Cross, Refugee Women of Bristol Borderlands, and Bristol Hospitality Network. Refugee Women of Bristol Hardship Fund gave about £2,600 to their members in forms of vouchers and cash. 7 women experiencing domestic violence at the time accessed £50 each from Refugee Women of Bristol's Crisis Fund. Over £52,000 were given to destitute asylum seekers and refugees in Bristol from Red Cross Hardship Fund, and referrals were by Borderlands, BHN, and the Bristol City Council. About 184 clients were destitute in Bristol at the time, and destitute were people who have absolutely no other means of getting any income for themselves. So the Red Cross has increased their destitution support from £10 to £30, which amounted on £44,000 on top of what we already were supporting people. In terms of food and accommodation, 225 individuals and families accessed food and financial support by Borderlands, and using additional food provided by BRR and referral by British Red Cross and others. 600 referrals to food banks were done by Bristol Refugee Rights. Aidbox Community Hub received about 204 referrals for food, and from 20 different organizations, and made 1,360 deliveries to 255 households. And Bristol Refugee Women of Bristol's they received about 350 kilograms of rice by Fair Share and were distributed to members and partners. And in collaboration with Bristol City Council, everyone in programme, 27 people were referred to homelessness team and accommodated under the Everyone in Programme Localisation Act. Bristol Hospitality Network has been able to find more hosts to host 9 new people. Collaboration on initial accommodation in Bristol support. So we supported Haven as well to support people in initial accommodation that was opened in Bristol just before the lockdown, and there still are about 130 asylum seekers there. and welfare and other support. The Haven received about £150 from Red Cross to pay for prescription for people in initial accommodation until their documents were sorted by the Home Office. And BRASP has distributed about 156 bath towels, 552 bottles of body wash, 264 bottles of shampoo, and over 2,000 toothpaste tubes. Bristol Refugee Rights early years team made 11 face-to-face meetings with families, 23 children accessed online storytelling, 29 families received food vouchers and craft packs, over 70 Christmas gifts were delivered to families, and further 35 families received supermarket vouchers. And BRASP members organisation ran a weekly timetable of virtual activities for members, English classes, storytelling, language groups, exercise session, virtual drop-ins and well-being groups. They have distributed over 500 masks to members. And Pride Without Borders continued with their support to over 30 LGBTQ plus members with regular phone calls accompanying members to the court, etc. Over to you, Leila.
Yeah, we kind of look into the reflection we took into three different parts. We look at the achievements, the challenges we have, and other key findings. Achievement: organization and individuals showed great resilience. More people accessed more support. There was increased efficiency and effectiveness. Flexibility of virtual support worked well, particularly when coupled with support to tackle digital exclusion. Improved service provision by Bristol City Council for asylum seekers and refugees. Challenges. Virtual engagement was particularly challenging for young people. The in-depth of support provided was often limited by the means. There was less room for strategic thinking and value-driven response. Small organizations sometimes felt isolated and under increasing pressure. Data protection humbly working together, an absence of cross-sector leadership and inexperience of delivering as a sector, maintaining connection and relationship with volunteers. Some needs became more pronounced and harder to meet. Other key findings. Organizations recognize the importance of and the inequality of collaboration. Collaboration easier when there is common goal, peer support, trust, being generous with each other, putting time into avoiding duplication, and having a clear division of labor were positives. Emergency funding provided opportunity for organizations to build new and deeper relationships with funders. Benefits and challenges came from working with others outside of the sector. Different approaches can be beneficial to service users, but can hamper collaboration. Collaboration should be about creating single ecosystem, not single entity.
Yeah, so when we looked at the relationship, we looked at two kinds of relationships. One, relationship within BRASP partners, as well as with other outside the BRASP group. So with BRASP partners, we noticed that there was a mixed experience. Communication was key and time-consuming and challenging. And for smaller organizations, capacity was an issue because they simply didn't have people to go to all the meetings and try and keep up with all the changes. Differences in the way collaboration was experienced by staff was different to the managers because we were more involved with one another. And strategic collaboration and operational staff had different views. Closer working together for some, whilst others became more distant. In the absence of drop-ins, some organizations did more for their clients and relied less on other organizations. And peer support, so we really helped each other. Trust, being generous with each other. And relationships with other entities was, we've noticed that a cross-city relationship with statutory authorities generally improved and it's working really well. Evidence of some gaps in understanding of asylum seeking and refugees community, such as their needs, language, etc. And we've noted that it was historic representation of refugees in the asylum-seeking sector at Bristol City Council in a high level was pretty weak. And challenging relationship with funders and quarter community foundations were very generous, and they supported quite a few of our smaller organisations. And so we thought, how do we do things about differently? So we decided that we need to have a shared approach to clients' needs assessment and shared strategizing and unmet needs. For example, internet access for all the clients. And hubs for specific areas of needs where more than one organization is active. Example, to provide accommodation, food, well-being, and have a clear leadership and lines of communications. Clear lines of referral, a single entry point, and clearer pathways, so the clients don't have to tell their story over and over and over every organization they go to. Opportunity to create shared values and work with these parameters. Ensure representation is broad and shared. Example, representation of refugee women should be addressed by asylum-seeking refugee sector, not only one organisation such as Refugee Women or Bristol. So we all have to do our part on it. Post-COVID assessment of service delivery approach, a mix of face-to-face and digital methods, and always client-led. Increase access to translation interpreters, and where appropriate, joint lobbying, fundraising, and working strategically with other non-refugee and asylum-seeking partners across the city. Relationships with others across the city. So we thought it should be strategic. We need to have strategic engagement and collaboration, communication with statutory authorities, such as Bristol City Council. Strengthen the relationship between asylum-seeking and refugee organisation and statutory bodies to ensure that asylum-seeking and refugee communities and clients are recognised and visible in citywide assessment of needs in context to COVID response or any other response for that matter. Improve connections between statutory and voluntary sector partners, clear pathways for collaboration and referrals. Improve representation of asylum-seeking and refugee sector, currently Vosker and Sari in Bristol City Council high-level meetings. Engage in Bristol City Council strategic reviews. Invite Vosker to join Bristol Refugee Forum, so they are more in line of what's going on within our sector. Lobby Bristol City Council on need for translation interpreters in Bristol City Council. Engage in work with Bristol City Council on those with no recourse to public fund, and hold City Council to account as City of Sanctuary. Leila?
So we kind of drawn some recommendations of the lesson we already learned and things that we described. So we kind of come up with two recommendations. Service users' voice and need at the heart of our planning for both the COVID-19 services. Services need to be designed with flexibility and enabling access in mind. With that comes the experience of more people are able to access online services. Improve services, improve service user pathways, clarity about who is doing what and where the gaps are, communication, and being generous with each other, developing a shared understanding of shared organizational values and strategic approaches, strengthening voluntary sector relationships with statutory bodies, building on relationships outside of the sector, clarity about division of labor and leadership, learning from other organizations and regions, explore broader engagement across the Southwest. Other learning that we identify is broader engagement across the Southwest. Southwest organizations want to be better informed and connected to Bristol Refugee and Asylum Seeking partners, sharing approaches. For example, learning from elements of ensuring internet connectivity in NAS and initial accommodation, reaching out to new dispersed areas in the Southwest.
And at the end, if we face another lockdown, and so our ideas how to do things differently. So we said that we need to disseminate this finding of BRASP partners. with statutory and non-statutory organisation outside the BRASP funders. So we will we'll share the report with all of you here and build the recommendation of this report into BRASP action plan, develop clear terms of reference for BRASP, including leadership and accountability, funding for partnership work and joint actions. Capacity of organisation is varied and inclusive engagement needs to take this into account. Further work on shared values. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing the screen now. And I hope you have some questions and comments on the chat, which we will address later on.
Thank you, Layla and Cherim. I'm going to hand over to Caroline now, who's going to talk about the asks of the mayoral candidates.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. So it's a great pleasure and privilege to be here today to see so many friends from the sector here and others who've come to hear this launch of the BRASP partnership. I'd like to add my thanks to Layla and Cherim for their presentation and start by congratulating them, Beth, and all the members of BRASP for their fantastic work in coming together, and thank Voska and you, Mark and Phoebe and Claire, for your support with the formation of BRASP and putting on today's event. So I'm currently one of the co-chairs of Bristol City of Sanctuary, and my job this morning is to take us forward from the point that the report leaves us. So I'm not going to go through all the asks of the mayor, so about 40 of them, and I think that might not be the best use of the time, but what I would like to do is say why we think it's important now to be making these asks. So everyone has access to them, I think, through the links that were given by Voska for this event. So how can the wider community support the work of BRASP, in particular our civic leadership? Over the past year, the member organisations, as we've just heard, have had their heads down, working flat out to mitigate the impact of COVID and lockdown on an already vulnerable population in the city. That is, people seeking sanctuary and migrants, many of whom have no recourse to public funds. Now we need to take stock, to look back, look ahead, look around us nationally and globally. Where does our work fit? And what help do we need to further realise the goals of Bristol as a city of sanctuary? So Bristol achieved its status as a city of sanctuary almost exactly 10 years ago. It was a very inclusive and celebratory event. I'm sure a lot of people here were there at the time. And the beautiful plaque made by Tashi, who's here revealing it with Barbara Jankum, leader of the council at the time, it's still hanging in the foyer of City Hall, and it's worth a look if you haven't seen it. It's a shame to say that many conditions remain the same for people who are seeking sanctuary, and in some ways they got worse. For instance, instead of reporting at Trinity Police Station, as we heard from Sarah this morning, what for many people is the worst moment in their week or month reporting to the Home Office, they have to walk the several miles round trip to Patchway in all weathers, even during lockdown, despite the obvious and unnecessary hazard to public health. Most people here are aware of this and many other ways that members of our community are harassed and distressed. But in these 10 years, there have been a very big growth in the refugee support sector. The number of organisations delivering complementary services, which are represented by BRASP, and a wonderful spirit of collaboration that has permeated the sector in Bristol for the past 2 decades. This moment feels like a coming of age. I want to take a short detour here to pay tribute to the commitment of individuals in the city and illustrate the level of experience that BRASP represents. So here are 2 faces that I'm sure a lot of people will recognise. Lorraine Ayensu was a tireless campaigner for the rights of refugees from within her role in the City Council as a social worker. And Sue and Jai was instrumental in founding and supporting Refugee Women in Bristol to start, and also she had the vision for what has become Bristol Refugee Rights. And both these people really crossed between the statutory and voluntary sector. They're both deeply committed to supporting refugees. Both sadly are no longer with us, but they did set the tone for an exceptionally high level of cooperation and collaboration, which continues in the refugee sector, as we've heard this morning. Compared to a number of people on the screen, my 16 years or so of involvement in the sector still makes me a new girl on the block. But I was involved in the beginning with one of the welcome centres, Bristol Refugee Rights. I'm just going to show a picture here because it gives a sense of the drop-ins. Yeah. This is a view of Malcolm X of lunchtime, and sharing food together has been central in all aspects of work in the city with our people who are seeking sanctuary here. There are now 5 drop-ins, and that includes the one in Kingswood, which is a very exciting development. And these remain a hub for activities, and most of the organisations of BRASP have contact one way or another through the drop-ins, the social centre being really the heart of the work here in Bristol. Many people have been actively supporting and advocating for migrants and refugees in Bristol since the beginning of the network that's grown into what it is today. Others have joined, sometimes from their own lived experience, sometimes as passionate volunteers. New support groups have sprung up, each with a particular focus, as we've heard, for distributing bikes, supporting young mums, collecting and distributing donated goods from the wider public, offering psychological support, creating intercultural events, housing people who fall into destitution. Some years ago, we tried to find a way to put these services together in one place, and we got a resounding thumbs down from members of the communities we work with, who felt they benefited from the variety of services in different locations. We applaud this. We applaud diversity in general, and this includes diversity of provision. Together, perhaps we can meet the collective need. That's the hope. To use the theme of this year's Refugee Festival, we cannot walk alone, let's walk together. So now we have in Bristol this impressive new partnership. It contains a tremendous amount of expertise, a strong and confident voice, and now the infrastructure to become solid partners in time. We deliver a wide range of services and we advocate for refugee rights. Increasingly, this includes the voice of those with lived experience, which is the most powerful voice of all. We need to hear more of these voices. Together, we're determined now that the needs of people seeking sanctuary should be addressed as a whole. We can no longer view refugees and refugee concerns as being outside the mainstream. So collectively, what do we ask of the city? Broadly, our asks are as follows. We ask you to affirm a spirit of welcome to people who are seeking a safe haven at whatever stage of their journey they are. We ask that you recognise and acknowledge the uniquely transferable skills and experience that migrants and refugees bring. We ask you to ensure that services are sensitive to this sector of the population as they settle in Bristol. And we ask you to listen directly to the voice of refugees and to include that voice in your planning for the city's future. We've formulated these into 21 specific asks for each of the mayoral candidates. All participants today have access to these. So as I said earlier, I'm not going to go through them, but they do represent the key concerns of BRASP. And today we seek candidates' pledges of support for them. I'd like to suggest it's a uniquely important time to be asking for this. We cannot ignore the context in which we are working. I realise we're in an election period and nothing I say here should be taken to suggest encouraging a vote in any particular direction. However, the deliberately fostered hostile environment puts responsibility for immigration control on ordinary citizens, from landlords to employers to health workers, sowing suspicion and division. And it's this policy that led to the scandalous treatment of UK citizens who are of the Windrush generation. It's still very much in place. The government has just produced a new immigration plan that seeks to rate the credibility of asylum claims according to how people have made their unimaginably difficult journeys here. In this, the Home Secretary has thus revived the myth of illegal asylum seekers. And this is happening in the wider context of a government that also consistently denies the existence of institutional racism. We have the recent example of the Sewell report into racial disparities, ironically condemned as an example of institutional racism in itself. And while Brexit has increased hate crime on the street towards people of colour, we have a government bent on preventing public protest over either racial violence or climate injustice. We urgently need local leaders who are willing to tell another story loudly and clearly. We hope that BRASP and the City Council will now see themselves as partners in bringing the needs of people seeking sanctuary fully into the fold of service provision. Moments of crisis have brought us together in the past. A picture coming up. So in 2015, we planted a tree of sanctuary in College Green, and that event was attended by the mayor at the time, the dean, and many other people from around the country. It followed a national conference, which was hosted by City Hall, on the critical impact of destitution policy on local communities. By the way, the hawthorn tree is still there. It's a nice one. Have a look at it in College Green between City Hall and the cathedral. The shameful and tragic murders of Camille Ahmed and Bijan Ibrahimi demanded review of social care assessments, which are ongoing. The Syrian conflict and refugee crisis has led to a busy resettlement scheme. So crisis brings us together, and similarly during the pandemic, voluntary and statutory sectors have worked closely together, sharing expertise, resources and responsibility on a weekly basis, more closely perhaps than ever before. Relationships and mutual respect have had a chance to grow. Last year, the City Council also adopted a comprehensive refugee asylum seeker inclusion strategy. It is dedicated to Lorraine, who had campaigned for such a citywide strategy for many years. There are 2 inclusion advisors in the Mayor's office, who have key roles in monitoring the council activities. So we have a strong, organised refugee sector. We have a City Council with a comprehensive working document, an inclusion strategy document, and there's a clear commitment from both statutory and voluntary sector to build on the relationships and experience of the past year. These are the pieces that we need to build a genuine city of sanctuary. So it's a moment to seize, and crucial here is the leadership of the mayors. We recognise that a mayor doesn't have jurisdiction over all matters affecting people seeking sanctuary. So we've divided the asks into what we would like to see the mayors do and what we would like to hear them say. So what can the mayors do? First, we ask that all mayoral candidates pledge their commitment to Bristol being a city of welcome and sanctuary. Secondly, that asylum seekers, refugees and migrants be directly represented in strategic planning, decision-making and preparation for any future community response. We also ask the city mayor to ensure that all elements of the inclusion strategy are vigorously pursued and implemented, that physical and mental health needs are met, that the council continues its commitment to funding the voluntary sector where its hands are tied in the provision of direct services. The asks cover digital access, the needs of disabled people, and many other detailed points. They are in the documents I think you've had. For the Wecker Mayor, the asks relate to training and employment opportunities for refugees, ESOL provision and access to transport. Those are matters over which the mayors have direct influence. Then what can the mayors say? Matters beyond the government and local authority nevertheless have public health implications at a local level, such as making all refused asylum seekers destitute, denying asylum seekers the right to work, and charging for healthcare. We hope to hear.
Caroline, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm very conscious of timing, and I think you're nearly there. You're drawing to a conclusion for us, aren't you? Lovely.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really nearly there. We hope to hear our leaders clearly condemn inhumane policies. We need you to speak out publicly for migrants and refugees, strongly and clearly, in the name of humanity and our shared commitment to being a city of sanctuary. One of the mayor's roles is to be involved in national and global debate and discussion. And we ask you to use that voice in, for example, Core Cities UK, Inclusive Cities Network, Mayors Migration Council, UN Migration Council, the Global Parliament of Mayors, and so on. Bristol is brilliantly placed as a member of these networks, with such an organised and strong voice for the rights of migrants and refugees. We ask you to continue advocating for refugees in this wider stage and seeking collaborative, humane responses with national and international partners. Finally, we ask for your explicit recognition that environmental disasters are a growing cause of migration and the need to consider mitigation of climate change in all policy areas at home. The treatment of people seeking sanctuary cannot be separated from principles of racial equality and climate justice. So we look forward to public declarations of support from our mayoral candidates, which BRASP members will in turn publicise. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. So I'm sorry to prompt you there. I know there's a lot, and because the people are complex, aren't they? And therefore, what the partnership would like to achieve also has complexity and detail. The documents have been shared, so people can see the detail. Thanks, Caroline. We're now going to go to panel discussion. So thanks to those that have put questions into the chat. I'm going to invite people individually to unmute and to raise their question to the panel. Please note again that that for access requirements, we'd like to see people's faces, and so that they can be seen by everybody and speak clearly. And I'm also going to say, because we've got 25 minutes, I'm going to encourage brevity and focus. So no long speeches, please, from questioners. And then I'm going to ask the panel to also be similarly concise. So let's start off, please, with Richard Annandale, who's a trustee at AidBox Community.
Hi, good morning, and thank you very much for this session. It's really valuable. Caroline's already mentioned the government's consultation new plan for refugees. I just want to ask the panel whether BRASP intend to respond to the consultation, even on the headline points, and just reminding everyone that the consultation finishes on Thursday next week.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm just going to say to the panel, a speedy yes would be great, or a speedy response, but perhaps expand the question to wider consultation responses away from this one, given the deadline is next Thursday. And I'm going to ask Beth to respond.
Okay, thanks. The speedy answer is no, because I think that there is an issue with capacity of all of our individual organisations to make this BRASP work. It's all being done by us on top of our normal work. And although in the long term, the hope is that it will increase efficiency, and at the moment, it's extra piece of work. I think there are quite a few of our organisations will respond individually. Some that will be led by head offices, like Red Cross will have their own plan to respond. So I think there will be numerous responses from the sector, but a coordinated response is a challenge. And I think that is something that's a long-term aim of BRASP, that we will be able to coordinate around responding to those policies. It's also potentially where looking outside of Bristol and beyond into the southwest is potentially something that we could do collectively together as a kind of slightly wider sector to have a louder voice in responding to those types of policy changes.
Thank you, Beth. Would any other panel member like to add to that?
Yeah, City of Sanctuary nationally is responding, and also we're going to do our best to do it locally.
Lovely. Thank you both very much. I'm going to ask Mary Briggs now. There's a mental health in the workforce question. Mary, would you like to unmute and ask the panel your question?
Yeah, hiya. It was really just to sort of recognise that COVID pandemic has obviously had a massive effect on all of us, including the people we support. So it was kind of just to find out what had been learnt in terms of how trauma is kind of absorbed or dealt with, if you like, within the various organisations, and if there's more sort of support necessary or lessons learnt, you know, what the kind of further action is from that. I should say I'm a psychologist working with refugees and asylum seekers, so I'm quite interested in this.
Oh, thank you, Mary. And Layla, can we ask you to address that question, please?
Yes, we kind of initially started, we just recognize how people live the experience having flashbacks and nightmares. So we were able to work with counselors to address some of the issues, start with some of counseling our own staff, and then moving into our members. So we are working with a long-standing partner Forward, which is a national women's organization based in London. And we set up counseling services for women to access in their own language. So at the moment, women are accessing Arabic and Somali language. And also we have group counselors. So some women don't want to be one-to-one counselors, so they prefer group counseling. So that's also happening. But also we kind of have few women who lost their husbands during the pandemic, and those are also accessing additional support. So we kind of really proactively, for the first time, engage in counseling for both of staff and members.
Thank you, Layla. Would other panel members like to add a mental health point? Okay, then let's come to David Worthington, please, who has a question about the diversity of services.
Hi, yes, good morning, everybody. I did ask my question quite early on in the proceedings, actually. So to some extent, having heard the presentations, I feel that...
Oh, David, are you still there?
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself. I was just saying that I asked the question early on in the proceedings, actually, before both of the main presentations had been made. And so having heard those, it somewhat sort of nullifies my question. I feel a bit more confident. It was really just about, you know, a sort of general feeling that there are a lot of partner organisations and there's quite a lot of areas of overlap between the services that they offer. And just trying to put myself in the shoes of refugees and asylum seekers, I guess, and wonder how they find their way through the sort of possibly confusing sort of melee of services, and do we feel as a sort of an overarching organisation that we've really addressed this issue and sort of optimised the way in which we signpost the services to make it, you know, as easy as we possibly can for asylum seekers and refugees to negotiate their way to the services that they actually need.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, David. Cherim, would you reflect on pathways and customer journey, which is the essence of David's question?
Yes, yeah, I will. Yeah, the whole sort of point of setting up this BRASP, when we are trying to make the sort of, not the customer journey, but the client journey a lot more easier to navigate through the really complex, you know, system of, you know, asylum process. So we're trying to create a single entry point for asylum seekers. So when people see one organisation, they have their needs assessed by that organisation, and then they don't have to repeat, you know, their story everywhere they go. We also are working towards trying to coordinate our services that way that, as you mentioned earlier, we don't sort of overlap on each other's work, and we don't, create confusions to the clients of where do they need to go for what kind of issue. We are hoping to have some sort of a client passport sort of process where the client will be sort of responsible for holding their own information, and when they go and approach a certain organization, at least we have an idea of what kind of work has been done on behalf of that client, therefore, so we don't repeat our work. And that way we will be able to apply for joint funding for certain services to cover the gaps that we might identify within our service provisions.
Great, thank you, Cherim. Okay, I'm going to put this question to each panel member, and I will encourage brevity. So the question comes from Georgina Harford from Bristol Hospitality Network.
Thank you.
Oh goodness, George. Oh my, Georgina, sorry. I think we've got a Wi-Fi issue. I'm really sorry. I'm going to summarize well, it's a short question anyway. What are your top 3 things to do now? Was Georgina's question. I'm going to start with Beth.
Am I allowed to say 3, or have I got to pick one and then let the other 2 pick one?
3. Imagine bullet points, not paragraphs.
Number 1, 3 is hard. Number 1, lived experience voice in this journey that we're on. Number 2, operational, working together as we start to go back to normal, making sure things work together in the new normal. And then I think the kind of governance and infrastructure that goes around everything we're doing, that's really important for continuing to enable that operational to work well.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, Caroline.
Yes, I agree with Beth's first one, the voice of those with lived experience. We must work to have that heard. And I'm only going to choose one other, which is to maintain the connections that have been established during COVID and build on those. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Layla.
Refugee women of Bristol have a lot of job to do in terms of sharing our own experience and expertise with the wider sector, as we have lived experience and developed over the years, different ways of working. My other plan is to kind of strengthen the current collaboration and moving forward into where we share more resources and more expertise.
Okay, thank you, Layla. And finally, Cherim.
Yeah, I would probably like to see more service users' involvement in our sort of shaping of our services, and have a clear sort of pathway for of services, so the clients know exactly what they need to do and where to go. So have some sort of a mapping exercise for the clients, so they know where to go at which stage of their sort of asylum journey.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you, panel. I'm going to just express a little surprise and then tee up the other question, which came from Deb Joff from Quartet Community Foundation, asking what is needed to deliver the aspirations and recommendations of the BRASP report. Let's start with Beth, who's the most smiling.
Could we have some money, please, Deb Joff from Quartet?
Oh.
No, I mean, funding is the obvious answer to that question, because we're all, collaboration and partnership takes time. That's the reality, especially to do it really well. And we're all trying to make this happen on top of everything else that we're doing. And really we're at the point where what we could do with is some kind of capacity to support BRASP and kind of take some of this work forward. We've been really lucky to have Vosca's support over the last 18 months or so, but at some point they're going to want us to be ready to fly alone. And so we need to think about how we can make that happen. And the reality is that we think that will take some kind of coordination, which means funding.
Thank you, Beth. And let's just expand that to other panel members, please, to perhaps reflect on some of the points that came out of the report, I think, that were about joined up funding practice. Chairman.
Yes, I just wanted to really add what Beth already said, you know, because all the work that we've done on BRASP was alongside our very busy schedule that we have to run services and, you know, fundraise for our own services and teams. So we would like to be to the point where we have, you know, some sort of funding, not a lot, but some funding to have a person who would move our BRASP sort of idea forward and make it self-sustainable for the future.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to come back to Deb because I realised I asked the question on her behalf. So Deb, please.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, just first of all, just to say it's a fantastic model you've developed here with Vosca and all of BRASP, and I'm really impressed by that. And just it's not just the people using all the services, the refugees and the asylum seekers who welcome this collaboration, it's funders as well, rather than having multiple funding applications from lots of different groups and not being able to work out where they fit together. It's really fantastic to see how everyone's working together, which isn't to say we don't need to also fund service delivery for the different organisations.
Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah, please, you know, sorry, Mark, I just wanted to say we are really interested in, you know, funding capacity for strategic collaboration, so do get in touch.
Thank you, Deb. That's great to hear, and I'm sure it's music to the ears of this fantastic partnership. Okay, we've got a few more. In fact, I think we've got more questions than we have time for, which is always a nice position. But apologies in advance, we won't get to everyone's. I'm going to ask. In fact, one was anonymous, so I'm just going to raise this one to the panel. A stronger relationship with Bristol City Council is desired, but Bristol City Council is not the only public body in this space. What about health bodies like the Clinical Commissioning Group? What role do they have to play in helping improve the lives and outcomes of refugees and asylum seekers? And I'm just going to add in there, WECA, because we're in the run-up to the election, West of England Combined Authority. Which panel member would like to address this point first, please?
I mean, I can start, and maybe the others can, you know, fill in. We were sort of focused on Bristol City Council because most of the refugees and asylum seekers that we deal with live within Bristol City Council boundaries, and we have already very well, you know, established relationship with the Haven, which is part of the primary care trust, part of the NHS. And having said that, we are not sort of trying or neglecting, you know, other statutory bodies relationships, because we have contacts with let's say with the police, for example, and we have contacts with NHS. But what we need to work more is to create or establish a relationship with WECA, because for the last 4 years, 5 years, our relationship with that has been pretty weak or non-existent.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Other panel members?
Could I just come in and say, I mean, I think one of the amazing things that we've seen in COVID with Bristol City Council is how much they've been willing to come forward and meet us in the middle, to support us, for us to support them, to work together to support people. And I think what's really important is that other statutory agencies do the same. You know, it's not just about us reaching out to them, but them being willing to take a step forward and work with us. And that's one of the things that we're asking both in the evaluation and in the asks, which are both for the Bristol Mayor and the Weka Mayor, is, you know, like, come to us and help us with that, with this. We need you to step forward. We've expressed really strongly, we are willing to step forward and work with you. If you can just step a little towards us and work with us, then we will, you know, we will work with you as well.
Thank you, Beth. I'm getting comments in the chat that some funding does flow from and partnership working with the clinical commissioning group to the Haven. The traumatic stress service is also NHS funded by the CCG clinical commissioning group as well. I'm going to move us on with one last question that is about borders, and this is from Tamara Southernbrooks and Jeremy Wild. I'm going to combine your question into two, the question's about borders between councils and statutory areas in the southwest in two parts. How to reduce the impact of border challenges, and I think this refers to which council has the unitary responsibility for, etc. And the second, I'm going to do that one first. How to reduce the impact of border challenges. To Caroline?
Could you repeat that question, Mark?
How to reduce the impact on refugees and asylum seekers of border challenges.
Oh, heavens.
Oh, okay. there's a flavour, it's really complex.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin with that, quite honestly. Okay. If someone else is ready to say, please do. It is a huge question, and it's not really within it's not within our capacity to manage that. But I do think how we respond to people once they are dispersed to the city, there is a lot that we can do, and that's contained in the asks.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Caroline. And another panel member, please.
Maybe I can try and sort of try and untangle this one, and maybe Beth can step in as well. As an organisation, as a BRASP sort of group, we don't have borders between sort of South Gloucestershire and Bristol. So, you know, we see clients as people in need, and we offer the same support that we offer to anyone at any time. But for my team, you know, Red Cross, the Refugee Service team that we provide move on support, sometimes, you know, we only find out when we make an application for housing that that side of the street is South Gloucestershire as opposed to the other side of the street. Therefore, they're not responsible for that client. So then we have to go to a different council. But what we've done so far is try to make sort of a good working relationships with the homelessness team of both councils, and share any good practice from either council to the other, and try and make sort of client journey as easy as is possible, or that the transition as easy as is possible. But as a charity, as a service that we provide ourselves, we don't have sort of borders. We don't have any sort of funding restrictions to help people outside Bristol City Council lines.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm going to change this slightly. I'm going to ask Layla to give the final word from the panel before we move to the next steps. What would you like to say?
I think in terms of coming together for the sector, I think it has been a long desire for our colleagues to actually bring the voice of lived experience into the forefront. And I've been involved at the beginning of Refugee Women of Bristol, Bristol Refugee Rights, and I've met so many people who come and go in the sector, but all their desire has been one, that vision of uplifting people with lived experience into leadership. And I think with this new initiative and shared values, that could be possibility of seeing more diverse staff and leadership within the organization, which will translate into assessment. People who access the services will stay and take ownership of those services and not lose them. Their assets into Bristol city, they develop, they have businesses, they settle, you know, and they bring a good income to the city. But we need to keep that connection. Only way to do that if we get the representation right. And thank you for all very much for our colleagues who worked tirelessly of doing, at least it started that journey. It is very exciting. And thank you for FASCA for enabling us to come together and share our values.
Fantastic, thank you, Layla. Right, I'm going to move us on. We're a few minutes before 11 and we all have other things to move on to, I'm very sure. Everyone's very busy at this time. Can we have a next slide, please? For one of my colleagues. Next steps, asks and pledges are going on the Bristol Refugee Rights website, and the partners will engage with the mayoral candidates to seek their commitment. The partners will update the sector in the run-up to the election so that sector organisations, their participants and people are able to see how mayoral candidates have responded to the asks. And then there's the election coming up. We've got, there's a couple of evaluation questions which we would like you to do. One of my colleagues, I believe, is putting a link somewhere. We've got some whizzy bang online voting system that's about to appear. Yes, so everyone, please, while you're here, answer these questions with your mouse and your, just answer the questions there. What more to say? And will there be a graph that flashes up? I think there is as soon as you've done it. So please click now, and then a colleague is going to flash up the results.
Yeah, Mark, it's when everyone's voted, we get the results at the end on this one.
Okay, great. So how many seconds more shall we give to people?
5 more.
Okay. Okay, countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the poll's closed. Rosa. Okay, great. So we've got, okay, we have results. It looks to me at a glance, thank you everybody, we've achieved the aims of this event, and there were lots of positive statements, weren't there? Lots of questions and comments were made. I can see, for me, it's great work. More can be done in strategic involvement, coordination of services, in simplifying the client journey and partnerships with others. And we've got some commitments in the chat from those to do that, which only leaves me to thank people. I want to thank presenters and panelists, Beth, Cherim, Layla, and Caroline. The report authors, Beth, Cherim, Sarah, our event organisers, the steering group, BOSCA colleagues, Phoebe, Claire and Rosa for making it happen. And BRASP members also thank their funders, and including Bristol City Council and others. Your ongoing support is hugely appreciated by this partnership and will be welcomed as this exciting partnership continues to develop. And there's a slide there. This is one of the things that BOSCA does. So it's our pleasure to be involved with this partnership. It's a really great initiative. It's developing strategically and operationally into a force for change that builds on years of great partnership working. If any audience members would welcome similar support from BOSCA, then please get in touch. And with that, I think we are there.
Can I just say, on behalf of all of my BRASP partners, a very big thank you to Voska for all the support that they've given us to get to this point, and particularly for helping put on this event today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. So thanks everyone for coming today. Please do have a look at the stuff that will be on Bristol Refugee Rights website. We will publicise it so you know when to look and where. And yeah, keep up the discussion, and between us all, we will continue to make brilliant changes for people and communities in Bristol. Thank you very much.